Student Data Analysis by Arjunen Karpen. The goal of item analysis is to develop the ability to use appropriate psychometrics to interpret student data from a variety of assessments in order to inform subsequent instruction. On the screen, a content analysis table shows the content, how it's related and aligned to each question, and using Bloom's 6 levels of taxonomy, percentage of students answering the questions correct, and at what mastery. In this case, the assessment was set to be 80%. Content analysis. The mastery of the content was set to be 80%. From the table, it shows that 6 out of the 10 students mastered comprehension, knowledge, and application. However, the table also showed that some of the area that was not mastered were superposition and polarization, application and diffraction, discharge characteristics. Using a whole group analysis, using some descriptive statistics, the mean was calculated to be 9.6, which is 64% from the mean. The median was calculated to be 10.5%, which is 70% from the mean. The mode, which is 10%, which is 66.6% from the mean, and the standard deviation was calculated to be 3.43 from the mean, which is 22.8% from the mean. The observation here is that the mean, the medium, and the mode all was surrounded very close to this area here between 9 and 10, somewhere that we want to be when using descriptive statistics. Whole group item psychometrics. Using the point visceral correlation coefficient, the PVS, provide this discrimination index. The possible range is -1 to 1, shows a strong positive correlation, suggests that students who gets a given question correct also have a relatively high score on the overall exam. The difficulty level was calculated for each question by taking the correct answer divided by the number of students. Difficulty ranges range from less than 0.2 in proportion with the 4 answer choices. Ideal value was calculated to be 0.62. Easy was 0.8. Discrimination, B, proportion of top correct minus the proportion of bottom correct. In tiering the students, we have the top tier versus the bottom tier. Suggested to be researchers showed that the top tier should be concentrated around 27% to 50%. However, since this assessment was a smaller sample, we used the 27%, which was adjusted to 40%. On this screen here, we have a correlation showing the correlation between discrimination and the difficulty. If we notice here, most of the question here, or 2 of the question here, was ideal, and most of the question was easy, which is focused on this area here of 0.8. Subgroup analysis. 5 items were chosen for distractor analysis based on the outliers. 2 items from the lowest difficulty, 2 items from the highest difficulty, and 1 item from the ideal range. Question 1 and 2 have a difficulty of 1, which indicates the question was easy because no students have this question incorrect. Question 11 and 13 have a difficulty of 0.423 between difficult and ideal, whereas question 14 had a difficulty of 0.662, indicate closest range to being ideal. A distractor analysis for question 1. In this question, the difficulty was calculated to be 1, complexity 4, using 2 subtasks, and the discrimination was 0. In this case here, we have seen that all the students choose question choice B, which is the correct answer. No one choose any of the distractor A, C, or D. Therefore, the questions, over 90% of the students got it correct. It was a poor test item. The item can be improved by making it more evaluative than selective. Distract analysis for question 2. In this question here, the difficulty was calculated to be 1, complexity 4, discrimination 0, similar to question 1. Correct response was B. 80% of the students answered correctly, whereas one student from the bottom tier answered incorrectly, choose distractor A, and one student also from the bottom tier choose distractor C. The difficulty, as I said, was 1. Complexity was 4, using 2 subtasks. Question A was easy. 80% of the students got it correct. 2 of the bottom tier students choose A and C respectively of the distractor. It was a poor test item. Distractor was weak. Distractor analysis for question 11. In this question, the difficulty was 0.7, complexity was 6, discrimination was 0.3. And what happened here, in this question here, we have the correct answer. The top tier students, 4 students, 40% of the students answered correctly, whereas the middle tier students, 20% answered correctly. However, the bottom tier students, 40% choose the distractor C. The difficulty here was 0.7, complexity was 6, using the 3 subtasks. Discrimination was 0.3. Question was ideal. The top and middle tier students choose the correct 60% of the answer, whereas none of the top tier students choose the correct answer. 40% from the bottom tier got it incorrect. I think this was an ideal, based on the analysis here, this was an ideal test item. Question 13. The difficulty was 1, the complexity was 4, discrimination was 0. In this case here, the complexity level was 6, discrimination was 0.3. Question was ideal to the top and the middle tier students choose the correct answer, 60%, where none of the bottom tier students choose the correct answer, 40% get it incorrect. This was an ideal test item. Distractors was effective because we see that the students choose the distractors rather than incorrect answers. Question 14. Distract analysis for question 14. In this question here also, the difficulty was 0.7, complexity was 6, using 3 subtasks, discrimination was 0.3. This question was ideal to the top and middle tier students choose the correct answer, whereas none of the bottom tier students choose the correct answer. 40% got it incorrect. In other words, this was an ideal test item. Assessment to inform instruction, the whole group. Whole group and discrimination. The discrimination value does not show the upper tier students perform better than the bottom tier students. However, the middle tier students perform marginally to the upper tier students. Therefore, the analysis showed that the test was easy. In analyzing the whole group for difficulty, the difficulty level was low, so overall the test was easy. Future action on assessment: create item with a higher order of thinking. Assessment to inform instruction, the subgroup. Item analysis showed that the range for ideal is 0.62. Top and middle tier students were not affected by the distractors. In other words, they mastered the content. Bottom tier students choose most of the distractors, indicator of misconception or not mastering the content. Assessment to inform instruction, and using item level. In using the 6 levels of Bloom taxonomy, knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, we have seen that the number of questions aligned to knowledge was 5, number of questions aligned to comprehension was 4, application was 3, analysis 4, synthesis, no question was aligned to synthesis, evaluation was 2. In other words, assessment covered knowledge, comprehension, application, and evaluation, but did not cover synthesis, which does not meet the concept of effective assessment. In the future, assessment must address all 6 levels of Bloom taxonomy. Strength and weaknesses of the assessment. Strength of assessment. The assessment was structured in a very clear and concise manner in which students understood their task. The vocabulary structure, and content were aligned to instruction. Students with knowledge of the content used their selection and elimination method to choose the correct answers. Content delivery during instruction was evenly distributed and had difficulty in discrimination value. Weakness suggested that improvement of assessment. Use multiple assessment, measure student learning objective, ensure that assessment is measuring the goals. Content of mastery. Mastery level, which was set at 80% proficiency. 2 top-tier students had a perfect score of 100. 2 middle-tier students had 93 to 80% respectively. 2 bottom-tier students had 73%. And 4 bottom-tier students scored below 50%. Observation from the analysis. More than 40% of the students did not master the content of electromagnetic waves and its characteristics. Students will have to remediate it in a small group to clarify the misconception and some area of reteaching some of the content. Future action. Be more cognizant of assessment items to reflect instruction and formative assessment. Assess students for what they've been taught. Use Bloom taxonomy to guide assessment. Be more careful of choice of questions and take in consideration the level of difficulty and the discrimination index. Perform an item analysis when the students score less than 40% did not meet the mastery level. Reflection. Item analysis is an empowering process. Knowledge of scores and breakdown item difficulty, item discrimination, and crafting effective distractor. This can be a very, very effective tool for classroom teachers in addressing assessment, in assessing our instruction in classroom.